My dad stood up at the church potluck, pointed his silver fork at me across two folding tables, and said the thing he had been saying my whole life. Too pretty to be mine. The clinking of serving spoons against glass casserole dishes stopped instantly. Dozens of people went completely still. Every single eye in that Charlotte Fellowship Hall locked on to me and my mother, waiting for us to shrink, waiting for us to sink into the floor and apologize for existing. He wanted the shame. He fed on the public spectacle of our humiliation. I swallowed the dry lump in my throat and gripped the edge of the table. I pushed my chair back. The metal legs scraped hard and loud against the linoleum, slicing right through his suffocating silence. I stood up to my full height. I leveled my eyes right into his. He expected a flinch. He expected a fractured apology. I gave him a dead, unwavering, starry. Tonight was the last time he would ever use his toxic noise to break us. The air in that room turned completely stagnant. But for the first time in 28 years, my spine stayed perfectly straight. I am 28 years old, and I deliver babies for a living. I work the chaotic, high-stakes shifts in labor and delivery, where you learn very quickly how to read a room, how to spot a lie, and how to stay perfectly calm while someone else is screaming. I survived my childhood by turning that clinical detachment into a shield. Growing up in Marcus Carter's house meant living inside a psychological war zone. Marcus was a deacon, a pillar of the community, and a man who weaponized his own insecurity to keep his family hostage. His favorite weapon was the $2,500,000 generational trust fund he controlled. He dangled that money over my mother's head every single day. Do what I say. Agree with my version of reality. Or I cut you both off and leave you with nothing. He loved to play the victim. He loved to hint loudly and often that my mother had cheated on him, pointing to my darker hair and finer features as his ultimate proof. He built an entire architecture of abuse around this fake betrayal. He made my mother endure decades of whispered rumors and sideways glances. But his obsession with pure bloodlines was just a fragile mask for his desperate need for control. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his narrative was airtight. He forgot that he raised a daughter who looks at blood and data for a living. The crack in his armor started with a simple, quiet conversation in our kitchen. My mother, exhausted and worn down to a shadow of herself, was staring into her tea. She started talking about the night I was born at the local regional hospital. She mentioned a terrible storm, a total power outage in the nursery that lasted maybe 2 minutes. She remembered a frantic nurse coming in and apologizing profusely. Though my mother was too heavily medicated to understand why, that story lodged in my brain. The next day at the clinic, I pulled up my own basic medical records to update my file. Blood type A. I stared at the screen. I knew my mother was type O positive. I knew Marcus was type O positive. 2 parents with type O blood cannot biologically produce a child with type A blood. It is a genetic impossibility. There was no hacking required. There was no deep conspiracy theory. It was just cold, hard biology staring back at me. Marcus made his fatal mistake 3 days later. High on his own arrogance after another argument, he demanded a formal DNA test. He bought the swabs himself. He practically danced around the living room, gleeful at the prospect of finally legally proving my mother's infidelity. He wanted the paper proof so he could officially strip us from the trust fund and cast us out as the righteous victim. When the envelope arrived from the lab, he snatched it out of the mail. He ripped it open at the kitchen table, his eyes scanning down to the first line. Probability of paternity, 0%. His face lit up. He actually laughed, pointing a triumphant finger at my mother. He opened his mouth to deliver his final crushing verdict. I cut him off. I snatched the paper from his hand and read the second line aloud, my voice dropping to a flat, clinical deadpan. Probability of maternity, 0%. The laughter died in his throat. His hand dropped. The room tilted on its axis. He was not the victim of a cheating wife. He was the victim of a 28-year-old hospital mistake. And he had spent his entire adult life punishing an innocent woman while throwing away his actual flesh and blood. I did not wait for his apology, because I knew one was never coming. I shifted my focus to the hospital. I walked into the polished, glass-walled office of Erica Bennett, the head of risk management. Erica was weeks away from a massive promotion to the hospital board of directors and a multi-million-dollar executive pension. She smiled a tight, corporate smile and tried to gaslight me right out of her office. She claimed the 1998 birth logs were tragically lost in a system migration. She subtly threatened my nursing license, suggesting that digging into ancient history would make me look unstable to the medical board. She thought her corporate armor was impenetrable. She was wrong. I completely bypassed her bureaucratic red tape. I went home, uploaded my raw DNA profile to a commercial public genealogy database, and waited. Within days, I matched with a first cousin. The geographical math led me straight to a town 1 county over. It led me to Brooke Mitchell. I drove to her house, knocked on the door, and came face to face with a 28-year-old woman who had Marcus's exact square jaw, his exact sandy hair, and his exact stubborn chin. She was the ghost Marcus had been chasing my entire life. Finding the retired nurse was even easier. I cross-referenced the 1998 hospital shift logs, which I could access as an employee, with the public licensing records on the state nursing board website. I found her living quietly just outside the city limit. She confirmed everything. Erica Bennett had been the charge nurse that night. When the power failed and the backup generators stalled, Erica panicked in the dark and swapped the bassinets to protect her ascending career. She buried the incident report and transferred the only witness away from the ward. Erica's cruelty was not random. It was a calculated preservation of her own wealth. With my evidence locked in, I had my lawyer draft a mandatory civil discovery notice. I invited Marcus, Erica, and the hospital's legal counsel to a meeting in the main boardroom. The boardroom smelled like sterile wipes and expensive leather. Marcus walked in with his chest puffed out, immediately launching into a loud, aggressive tirade about how he was going to freeze the trust accounts today. Erica Bennett sat at the head of the table, stacking her empty folders, spewing corporate jargon about liability limits and circumstantial claims. I let them talk. I let them fill the room with their toxic noise. I sat perfectly still, listening to the sound of two people digging their own graves. When they finally ran out of breath, I slid the DNA results across the polished mahogany. Then I slid the reconstructed birth logs and my DNA match verification. Erica scoffed. Opening her mouth to dismiss it, I stood up, walked to the heavy oak door, and pulled it open. Brooke Mitchell walked into the room. Beside her was the retired nurse. The silence that slammed into that boardroom was absolute. Erica Bennett's smug face completely disintegrated. The color drained from her cheek, leaving her looking gray and hollow. The sweat broke out along her hairline. Her hands began to shake so violently she had to press them flat against the table. The retired nurse walked straight up to the hospital's legal counsel, slid a signed and notarized affidavit across the wood, and looked Erica dead in the eye. "I have carried your secret for 28 years. She said, her voice steady and clear, "I am leaving it here." She turned and walked out, entirely protected by state whistleblower statutes, leaving Erica to face the wreckage. Marcus was staring at Brooke. He was looking at his own face, his own blood. Standing across the room, looking at him with nothing but pity and confusion. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, his shoulder hitting the edge of a leather chair on the way down. He grabbed his chest, gasping for air that would not come. My mother did not rush to help him. She stepped right past his trembling body and wrapped her arms around Brooke. Marcus was completely ignored. A ruined man, hyperventilating on a cold tile floor. Weeks later, the dust began to settle. Erica Bennett was stripped of her promotion, fired, and placed under federal investigation for medical fraud. Her multi-million-dollar pension was completely voided under the hospital's morality clause. But Marcus, true to his narcissistic nature, could not accept defeat. He could not stand losing his financial leverage. Behind our backs, he contacted Brooke. He played the ultimate victim, crying on the phone, telling her that my mother and I were trying to steal her rightful inheritance. He convinced Brooke to meet him at his lawyer's office to sign a beneficiary substitution form. He planned to legally transfer the entire $2,500,000 trust to Brooke, cutting my mother and me out forever. He thought he had found a new pawn. He thought he was back in control. My mother and I walked into the notary's office just as Marcus was sliding the pen toward Brooke. He sneered at us, gloating that we were too late. I did not raise my voice. I pulled out my phone and hit play on an audio file. The week before, my mother had linked the smart home hub in their shared house to her personal cloud account. It had recorded Marcus pacing in the kitchen, talking to his wealth manager on speakerphone. His voice filled the small notary office, clear and damning. "I do not care about the new girl." His recorded voice snarled, "She is a stranger. I just need her signature to lock Catherine out of the money. Once the accounts are moved, I will figure out how to restrict the girl's access. Just get the papers ready." Brooke stared at the man who had just claimed to love her. Disgust washed over her features. Marcus stammered, his face flushing dark red, reaching desperately across the desk to grab the paperwork back. But Brooke was faster. She picked up the pen. She signed her name on the substitution form, legally establishing herself as the sole rightful heir to the Carter Family Trust. The notary stamped it. The moment the ink was dry, Brooke reached into her bag and pulled out a second document, a pre-drafted, legally binding, irrevocable assignment of interest, prepared by our own shark of a family lawyer. Brooke signed her name again, transferring 100% of the trust's assets and all future disbursements directly to my mother. She used Marcus's own legal trap to permanently castrate him. The money did not move magically through the air. The legal ownership shifted like a concrete vault slamming shut. Marcus lunged forward, knocking a chair over, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. He had nothing He had no family, no audience, and $0 to his name. We walked out of that office and left him choking on his own toxic silence. The legal justice was swift and unrelenting. The state medical board permanently revoked Erica Bennett's license, and a federal judge sentenced her to 6 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 4 years. The court also ordered a restitution payment of $142,000 to the families affected by her gross negligence. The local news ran the story for weeks. The church fellowship hall where Marcus had tried to humiliate us suddenly became very quiet whenever his name was mentioned. The deacons asked him to step down. The neighbors stopped waving. He lost his reputation, his community standing, and his entire identity. He became a ghost in his own town. 6 months later, the hollow echo of his desperation reached me one last time. I was sitting on the porch of my new apartment when my phone buzzed with a voicemail. It was Marcus. His voice was entirely stripped of its old booming authority. It was thin, red, and pathetic. He talked for 4 minutes about how he was aging, how the house was too big and too quiet, how he had always provided for us, and how family should forgive. He tried to pull the old string, hoping to trigger my guilt, hoping to make me feel responsible for his miserable isolation. The old me would have called him back. The old me would have tried to fix it, terrified of being a bad daughter. The new me listened to the entire message with a completely steady heart. My pulse did not rise. My hands did not shake. I pressed delete, blocked the number, and set the phone down. I watched the sun set over the trees and took a deep, clean breath. My mother moved into a beautiful townhome closer to the hospital. Brooke and I slowly built a friendship, navigating the strange shared wreckage of our histories. We did not force a fairy tale sisterhood, but we built a profound, quiet respect. We spent Sunday mornings drinking coffee on my mother's patio, laughing without looking over our shoulders, breathing air that was finally free of suspicion. We built a chosen family, constructed not out of obligation, but out of genuine care and undeniable truth. If you are watching this and you have spent your entire life shrinking yourself to fit into a space that was never meant for you, I need you to hear this clearly. The currency of a narcissist is your reaction. They do not want your love, they want your submission. They want you to scream, to cry, and to beg, because your pain proves their power. When you stop reacting, when you respond with nothing but cold, undeniable facts and weaponized silence, you bankrupt them entirely. Biology is not an obligation. Sharing a bloodline with someone does not give them the right to destroy your peace. Blood does not make a family. Loyalty, respect, and mutual safety make a family. You are completely allowed to walk away from the people who hurt you, even if you share their last name. Finally, you cannot heal in the exact same environment that broke you. Setting a boundary sometimes requires burning the bridge to the ground and walking away by the light of the fire. How much of your life have you spent auditioning for a part in a family that was never going to cast you? How many times have you accepted the breadcrumbs of their approval and convinced yourself it was a feast? Stop begging for a seat at a toxic table. Stand up, walk away, and go build your own. Drop a comment below if you have ever had to walk away to find your real worth. And subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones always get the last word. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are watching this and yelling, why did Vanessa and her mother stay in that house for 28 years? Why didn't they just pack a bag, walk away from Marcus, and leave that $2,500,000 trust fund behind. It is easy to judge from the outside. But let us talk about the psychology of financial and emotional abuse. What Vanessa and her mother experienced is called intermittent reinforcement. I call it the slot machine effect. A toxic narcissist like Marcus does not just give you misery. Every once in a while, they drop a crumb of approval, or they promise you absolute financial security if you just play by their rules for one more day. You pull the lever, hoping this time you hit the jackpot, a peaceful family. A loving father. Vanessa and her mother were not stupid or weak. They were trapped in a psychological casino, conditioned to believe they could not survive outside the doors. But when Vanessa finally woke up, she gave us an absolute masterclass in legal and financial self-defense. Let us break down her smart moves so you can protect yourself in the real world. First, the audit strategy. When Marcus got loud and threw humiliating accusations in public, Vanessa did not scream back. She went quiet and looked at the data. She checked the biology of blood types and ordered a DNA panel. Narcissists and scammers thrive on emotional noise because it hides the truth. When you strip away the drama and look at the math, their lies always fall apart. Second, building the case in silence. Notice how Vanessa did not threaten the corrupt hospital administrator right away. She used open source intelligence, commercial genealogy databases, and public nursing board records. Never warn a powerful enemy that you are investigating them. Just quietly gather your receipts until the trap is set. Third, the legal judo. The climax at the notary's office was brilliant. Marcus tried to use a beneficiary substitution form to secure the money and punish his family. But Brooke played it perfectly. She let him finalize the paperwork and gain legal control before pulling out her own irrevocable assignment of interest. She used his own legal momentum to completely disarm him. In life and business, you do not always have to fight the bully. Sometimes, you just let them sign the contract that seals their own fate. 6 months later, Marcus tried to reach me one final time. I was sitting on the porch of my new apartment, watching the sun drop behind the trees. When his voicemail appeared on my phone, his voice was thin now. Stripped of the booming authority he used to fill church halls and dinner tables. He said the house was too quiet. He said he was getting older. He said families should forgive. But he never said he was sorry. He never said he had spent 28 years punishing an innocent woman. He never said he had built my childhood around a lie. He never admitted that his obsession with control had destroyed every person who ever tried to love him. So I deleted the voicemail. No speech. No argument. No final emotional scene. Just one tap. And with that, Marcus Carter lost the last audience he had. My mother moved into a peaceful townhome near the hospital. Brooke and I did not force some perfect fairy tale sisterhood, because real healing does not work like that. But slowly, carefully, we built something honest. Sunday coffee, short phone calls, quiet laughter, a strange, tender respect between two women who had both been robbed by the same lie. For the first time in my life, family did not feel like a courtroom. It felt like breathing. What I learned is this: narcissists do not survive on truth. They survive on reaction. They need you to cry, defend, explain, and beg. Because your pain proves they still matter. The moment you stop performing for them, the moment you answer their cruelty with facts, silence, and distance, their power begins to starve. Marcus lost the trust fund. Erica lost her career. The hospital lost its spotless image. But the greatest victory was not money, revenge, or public humiliation. The greatest victory was peace. If you are listening to this while shrinking yourself for someone who keeps moving the rules, hear me clearly. You do not have to keep auditioning for love from people committed to misunderstanding you. Blood does not excuse abuse. Money does not buy obedience. And a shared last name is not a lifetime contract for suffering. Check the fact. Save the evidence. Trust the feeling in your stomach when something is wrong. And when the truth finally opens the door, walk through it. Do not look back just because the person who hurt you suddenly sounds lonely. Loneliness is not accountability. Regret is not repair. And guilt is not a reason to return to the cage. Here is the ultimate verdict. Your worth is not a bargaining chip. And a trust fund is never worth your sanity. If someone is using their wealth or their status to keep you in a psychological cage, the greatest return on investment you will ever make is walking away and taking your peace with you. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation or use the rules against someone trying to control you? Tell us how you did it in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe for more deep dives and street smart strategies. Stay safe and remember your worth.